I was really flattered and pleased that Jon asked me to talk today because he represents, I think, what's happening now, and I represent ancient history. And what's really interesting is that being a historian and also still trying to make a living, I'm fascinated by what Jon's been doing. So could I ask you, Jon? Because the reason that we started this exchange was I noticed, and I keep my eye on, because I think you have to keep your eye on what's going on, what's happening with video, and I noticed that there were lots of videos suddenly popping up, which had the video at the top and underneath the copy, so to speak, what somebody was saying. There was essentially it was the words under the pictures. And so Jon, and I'm going to come back to why this interested me in particular, apart from the fact that it seems to work very well. Number one, Jon, we all know that videos work very well. How much better do you think this sort of thing works than just a straight video?
In most cases, we'll just refer to this as the ugly video sales letter, which is what I'm kind of known for starting. In most cases, ugly VSLs work better than anything remotely pretty. And there's a lot of psychological factors for that. The brutal truth of the matter is that when I started this in 2009, there were some guys at the time using kind of a PowerPoint-ish, kind of almost a webinar style of video, which, by the way, works as well. It just doesn't work as well as the ugly video. And what I did is got inspired from my studies of NLP in the past and also some psychology and all that, and decided that I would just put words without pictures at all. And let's see if we can remove all distraction that's possible. So part of the reason it works so well is because it reduces all friction, especially if you have a neutral voice. If you have a voice that's doesn't have an excessive accent, or and obviously if someone's hearing you from a different country, they're going to hear the accent. But in the United States, it works really well when you have a neutral voice and words on the screen with very little pictures in most cases. Now, if you have a very graphic product, then you have to show it in pictures or video. Like, for example, my own 3X VSL generator, I show how it works in a video, but the video of how it works is like 3 minutes long and an hour and a half long video. And I think the psychology is based around friction. And what I'm calling friction is anything that will detract the reader, the prospect, from watching the video. And in so doing, it kind of lulls them into a pseudo state of hypnotic trance, if you will. I mean, it didn't start off as being a tool to do this. That wasn't what I was thinking. But it ends up being the effect. When you see slides go by with the words on them, you're seeing and hearing the same basic thing. So you've got double.
You know something? What's really interesting about this? Yeah. Many years ago, I was nearly offered a job. Well, I was asked if I was interested in working for the guy who invented the USP, Rosser Reeves, and Rosser Reeves wrote a very good book in about 1962 called Reality in Advertising. And one of the things that he said, and this relates to our original conversation about to what degree does what happens now relate to what used to happen? Have humans changed, etc., which the answer, of course, is not. He said that if in a commercial, in a TV commercial, if you show the words under the pictures, you do much better. He called it audio-video lock. Wow. And it seemed to me, when I saw what you were doing, that this was the same thing. I mean, were you aware of this or not?
No.
Or did you just...
No, never aware of that. That was a new one on me. Audio, video lock. I like that. Well, that's basically subcaptioning, I would think, Yeah. I mean, this is what you do, isn't it? You show the pictures and you show the words, or am I wrong? I just show the words. And
you just show the words.
Yeah,
there's no picture up there.
Well, this is what's interesting is, and I know that you would agree with this. The words, the copy is what matters. What you do with the copy, then it's going to influence conversions one way or the other. So what we found is that animation, some graphics in some places, and in some industries, then yes, the pictures do help. In most industries, in most places, especially for info products, we're talking about products under that $300 range, right? For people who don't know what we mean by info products. Just words with very little graphics just seems to do the trick. And the only graphics that we use are graphics that say, here's a picture of me and my wife, or, so in other words, something that where you would have to basically say this. And it's not, I think the reason why this works so well is because whenever you show a picture, someone has an association to that image, right? Mm-hmm. And you may be thinking, oh, this image means power and money. And this other person may be thinking this image means greed and evil. Mm-hmm. So, but if you remove the picture, there's no friction there. And you just say the words, then you have less of a chance of triggering something in someone. So I think that's...
So you're really talking about words spoken with words printed and crawling across the bottom of the screen, essentially.
They're actually the entire video. In my case, is the entire ugly video sales that are caught on with basically just words on the screen and very little graphics at all. And the only graphics we'll use is the very first slide will usually be a graphic that will usually have nothing to do, apparently, with the topic at hand. And we call that just a pattern interrupt, where we're just taking someone out of their current state of thinking. Oh, this is a weight loss book. And we show them a picture of a donkey or something, that has nothing apparently to do with weight loss. And then we connect it to weight loss. This donkey has everything in the world to do with your weight loss, and get someone really curious to find out what you mean by that. And we open a loop and come back and close it later. So that's originally how this got started. And then other people started experimenting with, what if we did hand-drawn animation on top of the video sales letter?
I was going to ask you about that, because that's something else that interests me.
Yeah, and in some cases it works really, really well. Again, what I teach is to always get the words first. If you've got the words to convert, then adding animation or adding a little graphic may help it. And if it does help it, that's great. But if you've got lousy words, no amount of animation is going to help you.
So you're essentially, as you just said, saying that actually it is the words that make the difference.
Absolutely, which is why we're both copywriters.
Yeah, otherwise we're all in trouble.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting to me, because I was thinking of testing one of the hand-drawn things. That's one of the things I'm really interested in. Yeah. And I don't understand why they work. I've got a client in Philadelphia who seems to make an awful lot of money by using the ones with the quickly drawn cartoons. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'll give it a go.
Yeah, they definitely work, assuming the words are there. And I can just give you if it helps, from doing thousands of these things. I've seen animation bump conversions by 30%. I've seen it bump by 200%. I've seen it do nothing. So it's all across the board. You have to actually just look at where your copy is. And some of the most successful VSLs in history have no animation in them at all. There's a VSL right now that's making $100 million a year online, and that's a lot of money. And it's got nothing of the sort. It's got no animation in it. It's got no pictures in it. It's just text and a guy talking in a very dry voice. But it's because he's nailed the copy. He's nailed the market. And I helped coach those guys in person, actually, when I spoke for an event at Boardroom. It's a big direct marketing company here in the United States. Yeah,
Boardroom. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay, then Brian.
Marty Edelson.
Yeah. Brian Kurtz. Yeah. And and so the guys from Agora were there, and Agora puts this out. So I mean, they make that thing has an insane amount of revenue to it. Now that's including a back end, of course, but So the video sales letter itself, and what I like to inspire people to do is take a look at the most simple way you can do it first. So because animation will cost you about $1,000 a minute, to maybe sometimes $500 a minute if you get it really cheap. So why not dive in and see if you can just make the words work? And that's why there's so many of the guys I work with that are customers of mine that they just go with just the words because they work. And then after revenue comes in, you can start bumping it up with animation and all sorts of things, with all sorts of tricks that we can use to bump.
If you were listening to this and you wanted to know what really made a difference, what kind of products or services do you think it works best for? And what kind do you think it doesn't really work that well for?
Um, I've not met an industry yet that couldn't benefit from a video sales letter of some type, even if that video sales letter was someone speaking on a camera with the words right beside them, which you see now on national commercials. I mean, you never saw this before really that much. If at all, I never noticed it at all. But now you see, like Ford especially has all the Ford commercials on Football Sunday has the same images that it would normally have with the guy talking, except all the words are coming on the screen. And so,
so it is, in fact, it's in fact, going back to what I was saying about Rosser Reeves, in fact, it's a commercial with subtitles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think...
but what's really interesting, and it's and certainly to me, very often somebody will say something and you say, oh yeah, and then you don't really understand the implications of what they said. And what you just say, oh, it's VSL. Never say, oh, VSL, yes, VSL, great, wonderful. What's VSL? VSL is a video sales letter.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
right. And that's really, all you're saying is that it's easier for people to look at something on the screen than to sit in front of a piece of paper and read it.
It is.
All you do is you're putting the words up there and making it easier for them. Right?
Yeah. There's another ninja little thing to it, and then I want to ask you a specific question regarding copy, regarding how all this plays into the history of advertising and direct marketing. Because, I mean, lest anyone, the example that Drayton just gave, I had never heard of this person. It was before I was born. But there are great ideas that are out there that are 100 years old. I mean, breakthrough advertising is a great example of that, right? Or scientific advertising. So we highly encourage you guys to look at the history and look at some of the great ads in history and see why they work. But specifically speaking to this point, it does something more than have them spoon feed them the words of your sales copy. I mean, this is the question I ask copywriters when I talk to them about why they should try a video sales letter. Imagine how many more sales you would get if your copy was really good and everyone was forced to read every word of it. Because that doesn't happen.
Are you saying that the mere technique makes it so much easier for them to you spoon feed them? Yeah?
Yes.
But it's easier for them. They just sit there. They just have to look. They don't have to go. They don't have to turn over sheets of paper and this, that, and the other.
Right. And direct marketing, I still love direct marketing. I actually write for long copy as well, just as traditional copy. I think you should apply every modality you possibly can, every marketing modality there is. I'm just saying that if I pick one to start with, and even if I just want to add to the arsenal, a video sales letter is no longer, in my opinion, in any industry, is no longer an option. People need to know how to do this. The industries that we know it works really, really well in, by the way, I mean, dating, fitness, finance, any sort of a service area, these work extraordinarily well in marketing, internet marketing, of course. Yeah.
Health as well, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. So I've yet to meet an industry where it doesn't work. Even in real estate, where you're selling homes. Now you show a picture of the house, but I've got several customers that ask me, well, how am I going to do this? I've got pictures of these multi-million-dollar homes. How are we going to do this with an ugly video sales letter? I said, well, it's the same psychology. It's like when you're when you are the person talking to them on camera and you're saying, I want to show you this home, they're dissecting you without knowing it. They're looking at you going, I don't like his hair, or I don't like her makeup, or I like her dress. Well, you don't want people to notice your dress, your hair, your makeup. You want people to listen to your words. So by removing any friction that you possibly can, then you show them, of course, the house because it has to be shown. But then you relate back to, and this is where I want to get into what I want to glean from you, is how do you make someone interested in something for the reasons that we know motivate people? So people don't want to buy a house. That's not what's going on. They think they want to buy a house, but what they're really wanting is something else. So what they're really wanting perhaps is prestige or security or stability. And if your copy doesn't play to what they really want, you can show them the house until the cows come home and no one's going to buy it. Or very few people would buy it. But if you tapped into all these levers of what people really want, and this is what I think that the older school guys do better than anyone, because you guys didn't have the modalities that we have now, where you have voice and video and everything that you can appeal to so many different levels of the human psyche. So let me address that question to you. We're skipping around a little bit, but I think it's kind of a cool conversation. taking real estate as an example, taking something as someone buying a house, how would you address that from the position of emotion and logic and copy?
Well, entirely as you say. I think there are many reasons why people buy a house. None of them have anything to do with buying a house. I think it's going to make a lot of money for me, which a lot of people lost a lot of money discovering was not true, but a lot of people buy houses for investment. I have a client in Southeast Asia who sells property all over there, and I get a lot of people who approach me about selling property. And your point about the salesman or the salesperson getting in the way of why people want to buy property is very interesting. They might want to buy it because it says something about them. I think an awful lot of people buy property not because of nothing to do with where they want to live or anything, except about what it says about them. I remember that you are probably familiar with Joe Sugarman, who I remember ran an ad years and years ago selling a vastly expensive piece of property. And really what the ad was all about was how bloody expensive it was. And if you can buy a very, very expensive piece of property, that's got nothing to do with the property. It's to do with you saying, I'm so rich I can buy this huge property. There's something in London yesterday. There's a guy who's very, very rich who's bought a property in Mayfair, which is the most expensive part of London, and spent an immense amount of money on it. And I suspect that he spent far more money on it than it merits. But it's his way of beating his chest. And I think that one of the things that anybody who's been in this business for a long time discovers, and as you rightly pointed out, it's to do with what are the hidden levers that make people do things. It is nothing to do with what it is. It's everything to do, particularly in property, about what it says about you. Yeah? Where are you? I have a flat in Chelsea, for instance, in London. The mere fact that I have a flat in Chelsea off the King's Road says something about me. You know? I mean, that's not the reason I bought it, but but it says something about me. Almost everything you do, as you know, is to do with what it says about you. How does it make you feel? Not what does it do for you. How does it make you feel? I mean, you sort of got 3 levels of persuasion, haven't you? How does it make you feel? And then below, you know, what does it do for you? And then below that is the feature, what it is, yeah?
Right.
And that's what's really interesting about that's what's fascinating to me about what you've been doing, because it's sort of like crazy to me. It's sort of like, okay, this guy comes along and says, here's this medium called a video, and all I'm going to do is run bloody sales lessons on video.
Right.
I'm thinking, is he crazy? You know?
Right.
Why does it work?
Why does it work? Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting is like, how does it make you feel is the question that I ask probably more often than anything else with everything, with bonuses, with the main product, with every story that I'm telling, is how does it make you feel? And the power of using voice and tonality techniques accentuates the feeling that you want to imbibe in the other person. So here's what's psychologically an interesting fact. Whenever you, or when I say you, anyone listening, is reading something, you tend to hear the voice of your own self reading to yourself.
It's true.
Right. So that's a real problem if, like 99.9% of people on the planet, you don't really trust yourself that much to make a wise decision when it comes to buying. So you're listening to yourself, talking yourself into something. Now, that explains the 1% conversions that most people got for a long time on a lot of written copy. Not that written copy can't blow it out the doors, because it can. You just have to tap into all these things that we're talking about. But if it's just average, let's say good copy, and you get, say, 1% conversion, well, you're tapping into the 99% of the people that are listening to themselves that hit that page that either are saying, I just don't, that voice, they don't know they're saying this, but that voice in my head, I just don't trust it. But if they're listening to someone else's voice, it disengages their own voice. It disengages their critical reasoning, especially if you use a lot of like NLP techniques like pattern interrupts and there's a ton of different terms I can throw at you, but basically some linguistic tricks that you can use to disengage the critical thinking enough to where you can just lower defenses. You're not trying to hypnotize somebody. You're just trying to lower their defenses to get them to hear your message. And so a video.
So you saying it's a little bit like the sort of like a testimonial, in the sense that it's not me saying it to you, it's somebody else saying it to you.
Yes,
somebody
exactly.
Impartial.
Exactly, and that's why third-person video sales letters actually work better in most cases than first-person. So having me come on and say, hey, I'm Adam, and I want to tell you about something that I found that really helps me a lot. It's John's so-and-so. Is a lot more powerful than if it's, I'm John, let me tell you about my thing that's really going to help you. And of course, that's terrible copy. But the point is that you disengage first, then you go to a third-person testimonial, and it is literally like it's an entire sales letter built around a testimonial, which is nothing new. That's been done before in the past too. But when you hear the voice over it, it really clicks in and helps people disengage that critical reasoning that says, unfortunately, it says, I don't trust myself to make buying decisions. And a lot of people face that. A lot of people have those fears. So that's one reason that it works. And the other reason is that you're forced to read the entire copy. And so I'm the guy that started the trick that got us actually banned from Google. Sorry, guys. We didn't know. But got a lot of video sales letter marketers banned from, especially in the fitness world, kicked off Google because I disengaged the ability to stop the video. And we were playing around with techniques, and I said, well, I really want someone to be forced to read this entire thing. And one way to do that is that they can't forward the video, so we took that out right away. And then we took out the ability to pause, and our conversions almost doubled.
Wow.
And
now that's really interesting, because everybody, it must be the most boring subject ever, and the one most misunderstood is how long should the copy be? Mm-hmm. And what you're actually saying is, I'm going to make people follow the bloody copy as they would in real life.
Yeah.
Until they give in.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting, because I would think that, you know, if there were no other benefit from this conversation to anyone who's listening to it, the people keep on asking me, and I get so bored. Long copy versus short copy.
Right.
And I see the things you're talking about. Agora, I was down in Florida talking at Y about 3 weeks ago, and Bill Bonner was there. Mm-hmm. And so Agora fascinates me. Mm-hmm. And they run stuff that goes on forever and ever. And people keep on saying to me, what about this long copy, blah, blah, blah. And I keep on saying, look, nobody's actually putting you to the floor, making you bloody well read it or watch it or listen to it. It's up to you. You know, you can stop any time you like.
Exactly.
And you actually proved it by making it more difficult for people not to bloody well listen to it, not to watch it, right?
Right. And, you know, so, yeah, I took away their ability to choose, with the exception of the window out. And even then we have an exit splash that says, hey, you want to read an article about this, and it's the same copy essentially. So
don't go away.
Exactly right.
Are you sure?
It's all the tricks there, and it's basically like you're basically trying to represent yourself as a door-to-door salesperson that's got a really bad rap, right? I realize that, but they are the most effective salespeople on earth, or people are looking at you square in the eye, and this is the next closest thing you can get to that. And most people would think that would be live video talking to you. And it's not, because on live video, you can, unless you take out all the stops, like you don't allow them to pause, you don't allow them, and you just happen to have a very neutral look to you. You know, it's a different psychology is different. They've looked at, excuse me, I want to clear my voice. They looked at how people look at video of the same person versus how they look at the person standing in front of them, and there's all these different equations that they look at, but one of the equations is how persuasive are they. And on video, people tend to be about 9/10 less persuasive than they are in person. So it's the physical image of the person is nowhere near as impressive as their physical presence. And that's like everything from bioenergetic fields to you know, basically how, if this person is taller than I am, I feel, you know, there's all these psychological factors that are triggering off, which was, you know, if you look at it, what makes a perfect salesman, there's all these, people have different ways of doing it. They slip under the radar sometimes. Other people are way over the radar, meaning the guy's 6'4", he commands presence and he gets a lot of attention. You're Tony Robbins, you get a lot of attention. But on video, Tony Robbins is nowhere near as impressive as a salesperson because you don't have those dimensions looking at you. You've got a 2-dimensional image coming at you in a 3-dimensional format. But that's what's interesting is that it is literally 2 dimensions. So if you just remove that second dimension, you don't have all those triggers firing off. You don't have all the, I don't like this or I like this. You want them to listen to the message, which is why it's so important to be careful with the images that you do use. For example, if you have an image that you think associates to wealth and you show that image, it goes, wouldn't you love to be wealthy? That'd be really, bad copy again, but let's just say, wouldn't you love to be wealthy? And you show a picture of, a tropical beach. And in your mind, that wealth equals living on the beach. And for 50% of the people watching, they may have that same exact equation. For the other 50%, their idea of being wealthy is living in France, or their idea of being wealthy is it's nothing to do with where they live, it's the car they drive. Or then you're not connecting at all. But if you just ask the question, wouldn't you love to be wealthy? Then everyone's imagination is firing off on what they want to, how they see it. So why are you intruding on their imagination? So that's really where that came from.
That's a very interesting thought. Listening to you after a while, I sent you a lot of questions, which I won't go through. But what I would like to do is try and, if you could, because I would like to send, the people to listen to this, some of the the essential points that you would like to make to people about why this works.
Sure.
Because I think it's well worth it. To be honest, no doubt you've already written them down anyhow, but I think that if people, listening to this want to do better, well, it's very interesting to hear two guys talking about it and talking about what they think works and what they don't think works. And I think it's just as valuable, maybe more, to see, okay, here are the 5 things you really need to know about why this works. Because it does fascinate me. Some of the things you said are very, very interesting. What you're actually saying is you allow people to, as the point you've just made, to paint their own word pictures, to imagine what it means to them.
Right.
That's one thing that's interesting. The other thing is that it is an extraordinary throwback to where I came into this business, which is where you wrote stuff.
Right.
And people read it and they made their, they made their own pictures. And you're actually saying, it's the same thing. It's on the screen.
Yeah.
You're just looking at it. It's an easier way to ingest it.
Yeah.
But it does the same things. It makes it adopts the same processes. Am I right in that or not?
Yeah, I think you are. And for about 2 years we didn't know how this works. And by the way, I'd like to loop back just so everyone listening knows that I want to have questions for Drayton as well regarding everything from headlines to opening paragraphs and things like that, because these are the techniques that I modeled looking at the greatest direct marketers in the world. And how do we take this and apply it with a little bit of NLP tactics and the fact that we have the technology now that we can make someone look at this and within reason and force someone to read every word of your copy. So first of all, yes, the reason why we've covered some of the basic reasons why it works, but I think probably one of the most powerful, it goes back to the question that people will often, or the statement that people will often say after seeing a movie that was a famous book. Almost invariably, someone says, I like the book better than the movie. Right?
Very true.
Yeah. Why? Because their imagination was better than the person's on screen.
That's a very, very interesting question, because I think because people read the book and they can put their own interpretation on it, and then they see the movie and they say, oh, he didn't look like the way I thought he was going to look. She's not the way I thought she was going to be. And you really have to make you have to adjust. You have to make a mental adjustment. I love the book. Is that the guy I thought he was going to be? Very, very interesting.
Right.
So you're saying, well, let people make their own pictures.
Right. Because their images of whatever you're talking about are going to be much better than your own, in most cases. So that's one reason that ugly video sales letters work. The other is the removal of friction, which we've already talked about. In other words, you're not, sort of ties into the same thing. You're not impeding on their imagination, but you're also not giving them other things to look at that have nothing to do with what you're talking about. A funny example.
They can only look at what you've got in front of them. They can either keep looking or stop looking.
Exactly. You've narrowed it down, and this is what I would love to come back to as well. The two choices technique is what I call it. You want to give someone two choices as much as possible, either a yes or a no, either a take action or a don't. You don't want to give them nine. You want to give them, limit their choices. Preferably, you can actually kind of verbally get them into one choice. But so removing friction. In other words, they used to watch my YouTube videos, and when I was doing this for the fitness world, and when I asked my list, what's the number one feedback that you have for me about my videos? Describe the first thing you think about. Instead of saying, "Oh, I want to get in shape. I want to lose weight. I want to tone my body," people would say things like, "You have funny hair. It's real spiky." Or I think you're cute, or I think you're ugly, or whatever. It's the completely the opposite of what you want people to be thinking. So I removed that aspect of it, and the friction was gone. So those are the two reasons. Two of the reasons it works. The third reason that would definitely be way up on the list is that when you're watching something go by at somewhat of a rhythmical pace, it's very much like music. You put your brain into a state of slight hypnosis, and it's always once I say hypnosis. Hypnosis is just disengagement from your critical reasoning. Okay, so it's not total hypnosis, and then that would be kind of weird. But this is like just a mild form of it, to where you're temporarily disengaged to critical thinking. So not so that you can be duped into something, because I'm so against that, it's ridiculous. It's because you want a message to be heard. So if someone's triggered by words or by statements or by pictures or by images, they're not hearing you. They're hearing their triggers. So what we try to do is, what I do very successfully inside 3X, is coaching people to use the words that relinquish those triggers, that basically encourage people to put them down for a moment and to hear what you're having to say. Because especially if your product saves lives, like a lot of my products save lives, you want people to pay attention. You don't want to assume that they're paying attention. You want them to really pay attention. And if it changes people's lives for the better, then you owe it to yourself to market it in the most ethically but strongest way that you possibly can, which is why, going back to your boring conversation of how long or short sales copy, we both agree that the more you tell, the more you sell. Almost invariably long copy beats short copy. Equally boring for me is, ooh, icky salesperson. I hate to be sold. No, you don't. Look around your house. You actually love this.
Well, somebody else in a group I run sort of said, it's very, very strange that everyone says they don't like salespeople, but they love to buy things. Right. So really funny.
Right. It is very odd. And I think what they're saying is that they don't like the process of someone, talking them into something. So
they just don't like bad salespeople.
Yeah.
Anyhow, what were the questions you were going to ask me before I fall asleep?
Oh yeah. Okay. So we got through three of the five. Well, the question I want to ask you pertain to, I think the two most important things on a sales page are the headline, and in a video sales letter, this is the same thing as it would be on a text-based sales page. Is your first few paragraphs of copy. And now in a text-based sales page, that might be your subheadline, your second subheadline, your opening paragraph. And I would love to get your wisdom on this. Like, what have you found to be, there's probably, if you have a formula for a headline, if you have a really good, clever thing that works great for headlines, and to get the reader engagement to continue to follow through. In other words, I saw your video.
In all honesty, the answer is no. I think, I certainly think there are certain things that one's looking for. I'm certainly looking for things that, well, I believe the process of persuasion is as follows. And the words may be different, but I have to say something to you that you find it almost impossible to disagree with. Yeah?
Right.
The process of persuasion, I say something, I get you very quickly at the point, I say something to you that you find it almost impossible to disagree with. It may be quite obvious. It may be less obvious. But if I can say something to you you can't disagree with, then I can say something else to you afterwards that you find it almost as difficult to disagree with, but you think, oh, I agreed with the last thing, so that makes sense. And then I say something to you after that that's not quite so easy to agree with, but I agree with the last thing, so it's quite easy to agree with. And then it's all right, like taking somebody over a series of jumps in a horse. If you're familiar with horse, the sort of horses that go over jumps, yeah? Each jump gets a little bit higher. So, but some of the things you can say might be not clearly so obviously something that people can't disagree with. So let's take one of the most famous sales letters ever written. It was written by a guy I know for American Express, which began with, quite frankly, the American Express card is not for everyone. Now, that is not really a promise, but within it, there is an implication, there is a suggestion. What it's actually saying to you is, if you're the kind of person who wants to be a little bit better than other people, keep reading.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the next line of that letter goes on, not everybody who applies is accepted. And you think, well, the first statement was true, so I agree with the second statement, yeah?
Right.
So if you actually look at great sales letters or great ads, you will find that there is this thing which may be expressed in the form of a promise, or it may be expressed in the form of a statement. It may be, I'll give you another example. I wrote for American Express for many years, and I wrote one thing that apparently ran for quite a few years, and I began with saying, I simply said, have you ever paid a little bit more for a better seat at the theatre? Yeah? So I used to say to my copywriters, your aim is to get people nodding. Get them to nod. And then you keep them nodding all the way to the order form. Let's take a guy who once offered me a job called Joe Carver, who wrote The Lazy Man's Way to Get Rich. And so you sort of look, well, that certainly gets your attention, But then the subhead to that was, some people are so busy making a living they can't make any real money. Yeah. And that gets you nodding. Yeah. And if you look at nearly all the great copy that runs and runs and runs for year after year after year, that's the way let's take somebody else. In the 1960s, most people generally agreed that another friend of mine, Bill Jamie, was the best copywriter in the world at that time. And I always remember one of his letters began with the words, it was for Business Week, and it begins with the words, has this ever happened to you? It sure used to happen to me. And then well, you've got a nod, yeah? Well, at least you're intrigued, yeah? And then he went on, let's say you've got together some money and you're ready to make an investment, and you make the investment, and then the very next day the stock falls. And you say, oh, damn. And he goes through a series of mistakes that people make, and these get people nodding, yeah?
Right.
Your trick is to get people nodding, yeah? I don't care how, it could be very banal, it could be very simple, it could be very obvious, it could be, how would you like to make a load of money by next Wednesday, And I said, yes, that's not very clever, but at least it's something that, I'm always looking for ways that I find it, is it hard for people to say no? So I'm doing some work at the moment for some people in California who are providing finance, and, we're talking about millions of dollars, yeah? And so I woke up this morning and I thought, and I've been thinking about it because it takes, I'm a bit slow. It takes me a bit of time. I've been thinking about it in the back of my mind for 2 or 3 weeks. And then this morning I thought, they offer a special, a particular approach, and I thought, I've got this. I think I'll begin something along the lines of, if you're looking for finance, we have a very special proposition for you, but it only applies if you're a certain kind of company, yeah? So I'm getting people. So, well, are they going to nod when I say you're looking for money? Yeah.
Right.
Are they going to nod? You know, if I've got finance for you, I've got this, they're going to nod if they're looking for money. Then I say, but it's only for a certain kind of blah, blah, blah. And then they've got to go on, yeah? Again, Joe Sugarman, who's a lovely man, a very, very good book, Advertising Secrets of the Written Word. Mm-hmm. All his copy, I remember seeing him in London in 1978. He made a wonderful speech, and he said, look, the only purpose of each sentence is to make people read the next sentence.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, of course, what you do, that's exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
yeah?
It's exactly the same.
I actually think that, I think the principles that I learned and that I still try to apply are still relevant. But I think that people like you and, you know, I've got quite a few other people. I was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was with Drayton Makepeace in Florida. Absolutely wonderful, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
They do it better. You do it better, yeah? I'm still trying to do it, you know, I'm 77 and I'm still writing this stuff and it still works. And I still try to improve. But I think that the essential principles that I learned 50 years ago have not changed. How do I say something that you cannot disagree with? That either it's explicit meaning, you know, would you like to get rich? Or implicit, when I sort of say, oh, well, here's something that may only appeal to you and this, that, and the other. It's not quite so direct. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But the kernel of it is I'm going to talk to you about something that you know something, if anybody's listening to this, you want to know, I've been writing this stuff since the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. The one piece of advice I would give to you is this. I wake up every time I'm writing a piece of copy for anything, and I write pretty much every day, the first thought in my mind is extraordinarily simple. Nobody wants to read this. Yeah? That's what's really interesting about what you do. You know, because I sort of think, oh, this is a guy who's found a way that overcomes people's, you know, disinclination to read my stuff, yeah? Mm-hmm. How can I get people to read my stuff? What can I do? So I started doing videos, you know, and I find they work very well. Mm-hmm. And then I look at other kinds of videos. So I think it's... The interesting thing about this conversation is everything in the world is about content and technique. So do you get the content right? Do you know, if you are talking to people about improving their health or about losing weight or this, that, and the other, which is, you know, your sort of area, you know, what is the content going to be? How is that going to seize people? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is there some medium? Is there some means of communication? Is there some way of putting it over, technique, that will make it work? And the problem with most people in our business, in all business, in every business, is they don't understand either. They don't understand what the content should be. They don't spend enough time thinking, have I got some proposition that any sane person is not going to ignore? And having done that, that's not enough. Have I got some way of communicating that proposition, which brings us back to what you do, yeah, that is going to be harder to ignore? In a you know, the lunatic world in which there are so many means of communicating with people, so many media, so many occasions, that it's terrifying. But on the other hand, I don't know about you, but I find it great fun.
Yeah, I
wake up every morning thinking, hey, you know, maybe I should try this. You know, why not? You know, I think that's the most important phrase in the world is why not?
Why not? Exactly.
Why not? Give it a go. You know, I'm certainly going to give a go. You know, what you do, definitely, no question.
Well, I'm hoping that other people will give a go at what we're talking about here. And I have a question regarding your approach to continually getting the nod all the way to the order form. We know that people are influenced by negative things more so than positive things. In other words, that most people will avoid pain before they'll do something to gain pleasure. So how do you address that? Like whenever you start going into pain factors where, you know, if for example, if you were to ask a question like, can you just imagine the horror of going through life and then realizing that of seeing that you died at a heart attack at 40 and left your kids and your grandkids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're painting some sort of horror story. I call it a nightmare story. At some point, do you ever ask questions where they would willingly say no? Now, I realize that takes them out of the nod factor, but how do you deal with negatives?
I don't know. How do you deal with negatives? I know how I try to present things in a way that is going to get some sort of reaction, and most of it's to do with what's a shame if you should miss so-and-so and so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
I know how sometimes I'm looking for things that will resonate with people and move them. I'm always looking for ways of not just saying, well, I just said, what's a shame? I'm always looking for things like that,
mm-hmm.
phrases that move it out from the logical and into the emotional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be a shame if you could be doing so-and-so and you're not doing so-and-so?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But beyond that, I can't say... You know, the trouble with this business is that I've been struggling away at it for all these years, and I still don't know the answers, and I keep on, trying to find them. And then sometimes I do find them, and I don't realise. Sometimes you do something and you think, why did I do that? That worked very well. Why did it work?
Yeah.
I think one of the people that people don't do enough is try and reconstruct. And this is one thing that people don't do. If you have a failure or a success, most people sort of, hey, that was great, or that was a disaster. They don't actually try to analyse why was it great,
mm-hmm.
or why was it a disaster. I don't think people in this business think enough,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's not a very satisfactory answer, but that's the best I can do.
Well, I actually like your answer a lot. So you're basically taking a nightmare story or a nightmare scenario and phrasing it in a way where the person has to agree with you. Like, wouldn't it be a shame if you ended up, sick, overweight?
It's in the same sense that I want you to read this stuff. I'm dying for you to agree with me. I'm totally, utterly focused on the need to get the people just to pay attention, to read, to be interested. Right then, when I sit in front of a keyboard, I'm just thinking, what can I do that will get their imagination? What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's more difficult than ever now, because when I started, if you're writing an ad or a piece of direct mail, then you generally went ahead with benefits,
Mm-hmm.
news of benefits. And now, with emails in particular, I'm much more inclined to run things that will arouse a lot of curiosity, because people are so, waterlogged with stuff that they get every day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's changed, I think. That's the one thing that has really changed. The degree to which the element of curiosity has overtaken the obvious elements of benefit and news.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely changed.
You want to think would be a great exercise for anyone listening to this, writing a video sales letter or writing a sales page or writing whatever you're writing that's marketing related, is to go through your marketing and have somebody else go through it, like maybe a friend or a family member, and just watch their head and see if they ever start shaking their head no. Or just ask yourself, are there any places in here where they shake their head no?
Yeah, it's the nod factor. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Do you believe that? I always think you should be really, really try and not only be critical yourself, but get other people to be as critical as you can.
Yeah, exactly. That would be just a cool exercise I'd recommend for people to do, because there may be places where you can find something where you asked a question, and I don't know about you, Drayton, but sometimes I'll write and I'll be in a flow state, and I'll write something and I won't even proof it sometimes. I'll just throw it up and then I'll proof it later. And then when I go back to proof it, I'm like, whoa, I just asked something that was, I asked a question that would be easy to say no to, or I said something where somebody might have the initial reaction saying, that's not something you want, right? No, I don't want that, So that's not the best thing for you. So if you just go back through and look at that as a little exercise, it can be very beneficial for people. Yeah. So we talked briefly about headlines. If you don't mind just touching base back on that subject, what makes a great headline?
It's the same sort of thing, really. A very concise promise I believe that if I could sort of sum up what I think about what works and what doesn't work, I believe that there is an element that is missing that makes the difference between something that's good and something that's great, and it's the element of surprise. In other words, going back to the thing I quoted before by Joe Carbo, the lazy man's way to get rich.
Right.
There was a huge amount of surprise in that. If you look at the best commercial, generally people think that's ever run, I got on my site somewhere, I did something about it recently, which is the Volkswagen commercial from 1961, which just showed nothing except the dark, and then you heard this sort of noise of something going, and then you saw this car, and there was snow on the ground, and then you see a shot of a foot getting out of the car door, and then it crunching in the snow, and then you see it pulls back, and it shows in the background a big vehicle in the background, and then a voice simply says, "Have you ever wondered how the man who drives the snowplow gets to the snowplow?" And then it just says, "This one drives the Volkswagen."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why this is maybe the best commercial ever made, because it's got this huge element of surprise, but it also conveys a benefit. So what you're always looking for is that thing. So take my old boss, David Ogilvy, who wrote, again, going back to cars, at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock, yeah? Mm-hmm. That was the element of surprise. You go to as far as the electric comes from, and you're thinking, what is it? And you don't expect it to say the electric clock. So you're always looking for something. Again, going back to my friend who wrote the American Express thing, quite frankly, the American Express card is not for everyone. Well, that was at a time when everybody in the credit card business was saying, "Hey, have my credit card." Yeah?
Right.
So you're always looking for that. Can you take the obvious and give it this twist that astonishes people? This is a theme that runs through all creative work, not just in the advertising business or art business, any work where you see something and you go, "Oh," and you go, "Ah," because you see this thing that surprises you. Yeah? You see this thing that surprises you.
Yeah.
If you go through, say, the best list of headlines that I'm aware of is in Vic Schwab's How to Write a Good Advertisement. About 100 headlines, and if you go through the headlines, and I still look at them and I still ship from them,
Yeah.
I adapt it. I never do exactly the same thing, but the thing that characterizes these headlines is the element of surprise. Yeah, that's the big difference. Give people a big benefit, or tell them about something, a pain that they can avoid, and have the element of surprise. I mean, that's why you see all over the internet, you see these little lines that go, "Here's a tricky way to use weight," or so you're thinking, what's tricky about it? Yeah, that's a little bit of surprise. That's what you're looking for.
Sure.
That's the difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary.
Well, I think people get lazy with their headlines, and they think they just think benefit, and I like the added element of surprise to that. And
people are just lazy. I mean, most people in most businesses are lazy. We are lazy. We're all naturally lazy. I'm naturally lazy. I force myself to try and be a little bit more diligent.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm lazy. I have to try hard. I have to wake up in the morning and try and do a little bit better.
Well, I want to ask you one more thing if I can, Drayton, because it kind of plays into this, and that's that I really like your emails, and not only the way that you write them, but the content that you deliver. So wisdom in email sending, I noticed that you send very frequently, and that you also send a lot of content. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I see, it's funny enough, I had a very, very flattering thing from a guy today about something I sent out yesterday. And I just see an email at the start of a conversation. Yeah, that's the first thing. I want to say something. I've got someone coming out tomorrow that I think will make people laugh, you know. That's the other thing. I want to evoke emotion.
Right.
I want people I want people to smile or be surprised or say, I can't believe he said that. I had one woman who wrote to me about 4 weeks ago. She said, you write to me more than my son. I love it. Keep it up. So I'm sort of, but then again, yesterday I had a guy from, I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East. He said, you write too many emails. And I wrote back to her, I said, that's fine. I said, that's fine, you don't have to read them. I said, I'm only interested in the people who read my emails, because the people who read my emails are the people who buy, and I'm in business to sell stuff. You know? So I don't worry about, am I going to piss some people off? Fine, you know. My partner, Martha, who works for a hugely successful organisation in this country which sells investments. I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of pounds. She did something, she's done stuff that sells just for a lot of, you know, tens of millions. And she just simply says, you know, other people are interested, or they're not interested. You know, they're not interested, I'm not interested. I'm always thinking, how can I say stuff that people will find interesting and appealing, and always that I'm sitting in front of somebody. You know, they don't have to read it.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I make it interesting? Can I make it charming? Can I make it surprising? It's hard. I think it's very hard, because I write an email. You know, I probably, you know, not all the emails that go out from my business are from me, but probably, I would think so. You know, I do 3 a week that come out from me, and then there's the other stuff I write.
Well, I think it's important, though, that the distinction is made. A lot of people have, the vast majority of people I talk to in internet marketing businesses think that they should email their list once a week, maybe twice, because we don't want to anger the list. I go, then the list owns you. You don't own the list; it owns you. You got it exactly backwards.
It's all rubbish, isn't it? I mean, people, that's one of the big questions. You know, apart from long copy versus short copy, the most stupid question is, how often should I email my list? Right. So I say, well, just imagine, if you would, that you are dealing with real human beings. Are you on board with that? Oh, yeah, you're dealing with real human beings. Exactly. Right. So if you were dealing with a real human being, let's assume you have a friend or an acquaintance. Let me ask you a question. How often would you write to them?
Right.
Once a week, once a month? Don't give me that shit. You would write to them as often as you can think of something interesting to say.
Right.
And if you can't think of anything interesting to say, get another job. You know, that's our business. Our business is to find interesting things to say, helpful things to say to the people that we're trying to sell to. Yes. But if we can't do that, we're lost.
I totally agree. And that's the interesting part is so important, that because I know a lot of guys that email 2 or 3 times a day, but it's all hype and pitch and stuff like that, where you just do this great blend of long email, short email, send someone to a blog over here, send someone to a video over here, something funny, sometimes absolutely zero pitch at all. You mix it up exactly as you would talk to a real human being, and that's what I think is really...
That's what I try to do.
Yeah, it's very inventive. It works. So... wow, this is a great conversation. I wish we could just continue talking. Maybe we should. Maybe we should make this a monthly
chat. We can't. You know why we can't?
What is that?
Because I'm going to go down the road to meet a Spanish lady that I know that I promised to buy a meal for.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay. Well,
no, nothing romantic. She's just somebody that I think has got real talent. And
nice.
And I have a few people that I sort of... I think the word is mentor, but in this case, I don't, you know. You know, in our business, mentoring means somebody pays you money. To Mike, in this case, and you know, most cases with me, I find somebody that I think is really interesting and has some talent, and I just try to be helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what one ought to do.
I agree totally. I totally agree.
And thank you very much for sparing the time.
Goes up there. Check out what we're talking about as far as how Drayton and I position emails. I think he does a better job at it than me, frankly, because when it comes to emails, I am lazy. I will write these really eloquent emails, and then I'll go 4 days and and get really caught up in other things. So I'm taking this lesson to heart and just going to be a little bit more fastidious about how I write emails. But you can see how we do videos, how we do video sales letters, how we do what we do, and there's a lot of wisdom to glean. I read almost every one of Drayton's emails. I mean, literally almost every one of them, and I highly suggest that you hop on his email list. It's fantastic. So thank you again, Drayton. Really enjoyed the conversation.
A pleasure.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.